All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're excited to hear a little bit about the defense ecosystem. Certainly the value of that ecosystem and how the Midwest can be a true hub for defense. My name is David Watkins. I am the Senior Vice President of Entrepreneurship and Small Business at the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. We are a founding host of Rally alongside our partners at Elevate Ventures. We are actively engaged in building that ecosystem of entrepreneurship, innovation, capital. What are those new innovations that are going to drive the next iteration of technology right here in Indiana? And so I'm going to let you hear it, not just from me, but from one of our good partners here in the state of Indiana. John Fernandez is a former mayor of the city of Bloomington. He ran the Economic Development Administration at the federal level, now serves in a variety of roles, including as a regional innovation officer for a tech hub, a co-working space down in Bloomington called the Dimension Mill, and their new trades district. So, John, turning it over to you.
Thanks, David. Good afternoon. This is going to be interesting because actually, here we go. Our executive director, Pat East, was actually supposed to be making these remarks, and he couldn't do it because of an illness, so I'm subbing today. So bear with me. I actually have a few notes I'm going to have to wing, but you know, many of you are probably aware of Crane, the Naval Surface Warfare Center in southeastern or southwestern Indiana. How many of you are familiar with Crane? Yeah, so it's this incredible institution. It's the third largest active naval base in the country. And you're probably wondering, how in the hell do you have a naval base in landlocked southern Indiana? I don't know, but we're glad it's there. It's a heck of a resource. And you know, David mentioned that back in the day I was mayor of Bloomington. This was a long time ago. And back when I was mayor, we were constantly dealing with the base realignment and closure activities. So we're constantly on defense trying to save Crane. That's not the case now. Crane is having unparalleled success and growth in driving their mission, and so much of their mission is very tech-oriented as it relates to supporting our warfighters. So we have a huge opportunity with Crane, but their reach goes well beyond just southern Indiana, and it ties to this whole corridor that we could develop across the state of Indiana as part of the Midwest. So there's real momentum going on right now. So in addition to the work Crane's doing, many of you are familiar with ARI, the Applied Research Institute, which is a public-private entity here in Indianapolis that supports innovation across the state. ARI has successfully landed 3 federal tech hubs. Indiana is the only state in the union who has had that success. So first they got the Silicon Crossroads hub, which is a multi-state hub that's supporting the microelectronics industry. They landed the Hypersonics hub, which is a major part of what we're trying to do in the defense space as well as commercial space. And then most recently, the biotech hub that's housed here in Indianapolis called BioWorks, Heartland BioWorks. So there's some real momentum leveraging some of the resources that have come through the federal government. But we have a really strong defense tech cluster that needs to be organized to be better prepared to kind of leverage the capacity to grow those industries across the state of Indiana. So our organization, the Mill, is working with ARI, working with IEDC to start framing up a proper kind of hub, doing the groundwork to build a real high-functioning defense tech cluster that can drive growth in our state. So in the process, we'll have an opportunity to support our national defense, which is incredibly important to all of us, to grow our economy, and to create some real interesting career pathways for our neighbors. So we're looking forward to continuing this work. It's in the early stages, but we hope to be able to report back to you in the coming months and years as we build this cluster into a really high-performing global world-class center for defense tech. Thanks. Thanks, David.
Awesome. Thank you, John. So just one of the ways in which we at the IEDC are trying to drive new innovation in technology areas that can be headquartered and center around Indiana and the greater Midwest region. So that leads us right into a really fabulous panel that we have today. And so I'm excited to introduce the panelists for the Midwest Tech Corridor, where the future of America's defense is made. And leading it off is the Honorable Lisa Hirschman, Chair of the Board of Advisors for the Purdue Applied Research Institute. Lisa? And next, please join me in welcoming Ryan Lewis, partner at SRI Ventures. Ryan, welcome. Next, we have Mike Dodd, principal at the National Security Innovation Capital, NSIC. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
Who's your native there? And excited then to also welcome Christopher Rohe, the CEO of GuardianSat. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you.
Lisa, I turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming today. We have a great group of panelists, and we're going to start with just brief introductions. So why don't we start down? Chris, we'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you for attending today. I'm Chris Rohe. It's always interesting. They say give an intro and you find out you're just bragging about yourself. So hopefully there's some context here too that we can touch on later. I'm CEO of GuardianSat, co-founder of GuardianSat that I founded with Rob Briskman, who today is 91 years old. He was a co-founder of SiriusXM Radio too. We are tackling space domain awareness and orbital debris challenges in geosynchronous orbit. I'm also the co-founder of Rogue Industries, which is a GovTech company in AI, IT, and even advanced manufacturing and construction. I got my start in GovTech in really 1996 as a cadet at the United States Air Force Academy. And I always say I went there to play football, but I stayed for the right reasons. I really jumped into all the academic opportunities that I had at the Air Force Academy and was lucky or fortunate enough to get a scholarship to attend the Kennedy School of Government. And in so doing, I was enrolled in the National Security Program under the late Ashton Carter. And at the time, I did my thesis work on what was called at that time in 2001, commercializing the way the government does business. You know, how do we promote the transition of new, novel, and transformative technologies into this government ecosystem, which, as you know, Mike, is now called dual-use technologies. How do we encourage small business across the nation to actively engage as opposed to actively avoid the government ecosystem? And how do we break down all the barriers to entry, which I think, thank you, Lisa, we've done a great job. Today it's a lot different than it was in 2001. But at the time, I'll be honest, I didn't really know anything about government acquisition. And I learned a great deal at Harvard. So that was really the theme to my career. I spent 20 years, both active duty and reserve, in a lot of stretch assignments, working on things from hypersonics to IT to AI to even base realignment and closure, as we mentioned earlier as well. I transitioned out of active duty into reserves in 2005, became a general contractor and developer in Florida, and then took what I call a stretch assignment with Lockheed Martin. I ran advanced programs for missiles and fire control systems and also did a lot of detail work with Skunk Works as well. After 6 years there, I realized that I was drawn to small business. I'd sponsored 72 small businesses at the time. I started my first small GovTech company here in Indiana, in the Northeast Indiana Innovation Center, working on exotic alloys and advanced manufacturing, and then leveraged that exit to start both GuardianSat and Rogue. So with that, I think I've had both the government buyer side and acquisition side perspective. I've been in the large prime sponsoring small businesses, and now I own two decently successful small business companies. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Chris. Mike?
No, thanks, Lisa. Welcome, everyone. So Mike Dodd. I'm also a Carmel resident, so glad to be doing this locally. But retired Marine infantry officer. I was a Force Recon guy. Retired from the Marine Corps, founded, ran, and then sold the company to a private equity fund, who I then stayed with for about 15 years, managing all their portfolio for U.S. Gov contracts, national security companies. At any given time, worked with 35 or 40 companies in the portfolio, about 2.2 billion assets under management. And kind of the model or thesis there was to give them access to capital, strip out redundancies, allow the companies to scale, lever the fund's balance sheet, right, so that they could win larger contracts and perform. So kind of fast forward, also hung my own shingle out 7 or so years ago. That's Dialtis, and continue to advise early stage, however, public and private companies on all facets of their business strategy, again, gaining access to capital directorship and scaling. And then most recently worked for the Defense Innovation Unit, so I am the Department of Defense. Inside the Defense Innovation Unit is the National Security Innovation Capital. So I advise the department on their dual-use hardware investments across all 14 topics of interest currently that the Department of Defense has. So super interested to be here. The NSIC, part of the NSIC mission, and I know we'll Q&A, is to get companies enough capital to get across that proverbial valley of death, and also to prevent adversarial capital from working their way into these compelling technology companies that are interesting to the department. But thanks for having me. Great to be here. Thanks, Lisa.
Thanks, Mike. Brian?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to be here. I'm a Midwesterner, so it's always great to be back. But Sir Ryan Lewis, I'm a partner at SRI Ventures. That's the corporate venture fund for Stanford Research Institute. We have kind of a unique model in that we can either spin companies out, leveraging IP that we have or that we've partnered with other universities or accelerators, or we can invest in early stage companies, usually think pre-seed or seed stage, where we will invest, we can lead those rounds as well as do co-development work. Reason I got involved with that investment group was I've been either an operator or an allocator, usually looking at the intersection of emerging tech and defense. I'm a software person by background, so don't listen to me if I say anything about hardware. I see the FPGA shirt. That's the coolest shirt I've seen in probably 10 years. We'll talk about that offline. But in this role, a majority of our portfolio does some work with the U.S. Defense Department or intelligence agencies, and we'll be talking about it on the panel today. But one of the things that we discuss both in my current funds or current fund or certainly in the past is what is the right type of positioning. So some of our companies are pure plays in that they service only the U.S. government or allied governments. Others are commercial first that try to merge into the government. Sometimes it's vice versa. And all of those have their own pros and cons. And so it's something that certainly seen a lot of different lessons learned on that.
Thanks, Ryan. And I'll be brief, but again, my name is Lisa Hirschman. My academic background is in engineering. I spent majority of my career in the private sector. I've done everything from, I was an aerospace engineer for General Electric and used to work on submarines, and I've worked in tech. And it was that along with publishing a book several years ago on transforming organizations that actually got me to the Department of Defense. I had the privilege of serving in the last administration as the Chief Management Officer. That was the number 3 position at the DoD, and I was in charge of reform as well as modernizing the Department of Defense. It was very interesting in that Congress had the wherewithal to ensure that anyone who filled my role did not come from government. So that was a little bit of a pro and a con. They wanted to know what private sector practices were in theory. And then when you got to the implementation, maybe it wasn't such a good sell. So it was a fantastic opportunity. We were in charge of looking at how to modernize but also save money to be directed toward higher priorities to support the national defense strategy. And in 3 years' time, we saved $37 billion. And at the time we were leaving, we were at a $1 billion a month pace. So we were headed toward $100 billion in 5 years. So had a great team, and I'm hoping that the folks finished the work. So, all right, well, gentlemen, thank you. As you can see, we have a great panel here, and they have asked me to poll our audience here. How many of you are from state, local, or federal government? All right. How about from academia? Excellent. How about companies who've been in business fewer than 10 years? Okay. How about more than 10 years? 10 years or more? Excellent. And then how about folks from the investment community? All right. This is perfect. So we've got a great, we want to make sure that we can tailor some of our responses to make sure you're getting the most out of this panel. So let me start a little bit with a landscape of the Department of Defense, because these are things that are not necessarily intuitive. So currently the budget is approximately $850 billion, and that's with a B. It's a little hard to get your head wrapped around that kind of money. And just to put it in perspective, the Department of Defense has the 19th largest economy in the world. So it's about the size of Belgium, if you think about that. So not to scare you, but to level set a little bit about the complexity and the size. Chris, I was impressed that you said you studied DoD procurement at Harvard. Is that a 4-year course or 8-year?
10.
Okay, well played. And for those of you who are looking at those acquisition and procurement pathways, there are 45, this is when I left, 45,000 contracting officers and 2,500 contracting offices. And I could spend all day giving you stories, but I won't do that because these guys are eager to address some of your concerns. So again, that gives you a little bit of the landscape of DoD. But now let's talk about our mission and national security and how we defend this country. And typically when you talk about the Pentagon or the Department of Defense, what comes to mind? Tanks, F-35s, submarines, ships, missiles, etc. But now shift. The landscape is shifting. We're worried about cyber attacks. We're worried about intellectual property and secrets being stolen. We're looking at supply chains being disrupted and how it's impacting economies. So it's not only have the weapons changed, but it's not the usual suspects who are attacking anymore. Certainly we think about Russia and China, but then we think about smaller organizations, smaller factions that aren't even necessarily on the radar are starting to penetrate the veil of our national security. So not long ago, you may have heard about this in the news, there was a group of Houthis who had acquired some cheap drones from Iran, and they were attacking ships in the Red Sea. They purchased the drones at the cost of about $2,000 to $20,000 per drone. So how did we respond? So they were, attacking ships, disrupting supply chains. We responded by shooting missiles at them because that's what we've got. How much did we spend? 1 to 10 million per missile. So this is called asymmetric warfare. We're going to see a lot more of this from actors that we don't necessarily suspect. So let's do a what if for a moment. What if someone had doesn't matter whether it comes from a university, small company, large company, had a disruptive technology that could instead, say, interfere or overtake the communication pathways for those drones? It would be a whole different war that we're fighting. And I think that's where we're headed. And this is why it's important. And we appreciate that Rally's having this panel because these gentlemen are on the cutting edge of seeing what's in the forefront and what we can do to strengthen our national security. So with that, gentlemen, let me ask you, if you could each, and Ryan, we'll start with you, describe a little bit about what your organization does specifically for national defense and how do your products or services support national security?
Yeah, so a majority of the broader Institute's funding will come from the U.S. government in some capacity. So think primarily through the major R&D channels. So think of, if you're in the defense group, DARPA, or the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. The intelligence agency has its own IARPA, and then other groups like National Science Foundation. So a majority of the IP portfolio that's built has some legacy connection to our national security infrastructure. From the venture side, right, when we're investing, we want to leverage or benefit that IP back to the government if it makes sense. I think one of the things that I've certainly seen in my career is that historically, right, you would see emerging tech, wherever it was from, Valley or anywhere else, almost completely divorced in some ways from government R&D. Like I came up doing databases, all open source work, and the government was running its own database systems. And I remember the first time I went on site and I was trying to download something from the internet, and they were like, what are you doing? And that was a kind of a rough way to get going in a career. But I think one of the big trends, right, that we've certainly seen that percolates down to a strategic or corporate venture group like myself is that even with some of the applied research or even emerging basic research that the Institute does now, is that the government has specified to say what are potential commercialization paths. It could be completely pie in the sky stuff, but that's important because when we're now talking with emerging tech companies that maybe are interested in defense, maybe not, maybe they just don't know, there is a lot more interest in tying perhaps sort of core research programs to emerging technology companies. So I think when our ventures group was first stood up, it certainly was not, I think, the intention to serve as a bridge, but I think we've started to become that way in certain technical areas. Like an example would be, take like really kind of niche or complex systems, like an INU system, right, for GPS denied areas. That is not a common problem, right, that I think a lot of other commercial applications think of, right? We have our phone, it works just fine. Even when you're indoors, it may be off a little bit, but that's okay. But to your example, right, with a counter-drone situation, you may have GPS spoofed, GPS denied. Now suddenly that problem, where you wanted to try to have a low-cost solution to a low-cost adversary, suddenly gets really complex really quick. And so that's an example of an area where we've been trying to take some of that early research and help either spin out a company or work with an existing company to get that type of technical know-how so they can get to market faster.
Excellent. Thank you. Mike?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. So, of course, being part of the department, the Defense Innovation Unit now direct reports to Secretary of Defense. It was a huge move for the organization. But DAU as an organization, kind of the top line thesis is to deter major conflict or a force to fight, well, we have the technological advantage to win. So myself and the DIUers are out and about, and we're coming to events like this in a very push-pull kind of fashion, trying to find the technologists where they are and the communities and the ecosystems where they are, and trying to understand their capabilities and how may they map to the problem sets that we're working on. And oftentimes that's through teaming or aggregation of capability that will take them further upstream to the unified combatant commands or the ultimate off-takers, right, of these technologies. So we want to find the technologist, and then in kind of reverse format, we have what we call embeds who are at all the unified combatant commands working directly with the warfighters, trying to understand their problem sets and the challenges that they're facing across all spectrums. So whether it's communications, weapons, optics, food, nutrition, gear, all of it kind of factors in there. So you've got creating the demand signal and then going out into the ecosystem to find the performers who are there. And then two other things that are important in parallel to that. One is providing them an actual agile acquisition to get onto contract. So to oversimplify, flash to bang, DIU can release what we call a CSO or commercial solutions offering. You could propose on that and be under contract in under 60 or 90 days, right? So we're going after very compelling technologies that are going to impact the department's topics of interest or mission profile. The kind of third leg of that on the investment side, we're very eager to work with both private equity, venture capital, and we also work very closely with the newly formed organization, the Office of Strategic Capital, to help companies actually scale, right? So the department can only award contracts to the extent that you have quals, past performance, and the financial capacity to perform. So if you can't demonstrate that third leg, the financial capacity to perform, it's really hard for those compelling technology companies to actually scale. So we love working with PE, VC, and the Office of Strategic Capital to give the performers an opportunity to attract follow-on investment with NSIC, right? We come in on a non-diluted basis and actually have these companies scale.
All right, thanks. Chris?
This is great. So I'm the third leg of the stool if you want to think about this. So we've got PE, VC, we've got a government enterprise called DIU that attracts some commercial disruptors, and then I literally come in, as I always say, the tip of the spear. So we win direct government contracts, and we partner with what we call the best athletes, and we do what I was unable to do in uniform is take an exhaustive audit and look at what I called focused long-term challenges as a nation and national security. and then find solutions, team with those companies, and then put them through our prime contracts. We're the prime, so all of the certs and the reps and the certified past performance and the financial backing is really taken care of by Rogue or GuardianSat, either in GovTech or Space Tech. And that way, what the government's really doing when they award a contract is they're delegating that opportunity for you to execute. But they still manage. There's still program offices across every branch of service. I'm Air Force, so I always go to that. And when you think about that, when we talk about clusters, is you've got LA Air Force Base, which is space. You've got Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is platforms. You've got Eglin, which is armaments. And then you really have Hanscom Air Force Base, which is C5ISR. And you've got to look at the government landscape if you want to penetrate it based on what you're doing or what solution or capability you have. Geographically as a nation, I always say, and it's really difficult, I'll kind of dovetail and get off topic here a little bit, is the government's extremely transparent. You need to engage and know where to look. So with Rogue and also with GuardianSat as platform companies in GovTech and Space Tech, is I realized, because I was the president of the National Advanced Mobility Consortia in Troy, Michigan, and that was an other transaction agreement authority consortia, very much like DIU, is that a lot of individuals come in audiences and they said, this isn't working for me. And I'd be like, what are you talking about? This is beautiful. We have 300 companies. We've awarded or obligated $655 million last year alone. We're helping with the Joint Lightweight Tactical Vehicle System. They're like, we've been here for 3 years. We've gotten 0 contracts. And I realized that was an aha moment for me, really roughly back in 2013, 2014, is that you almost need a Sherpa in this government space too. And you need individuals that have done it before. So we have a cadre of former acquisition officers, if that makes sense. We're program managers in the military, different branches of service. We leverage programs such as Skills Bridge, where you can hire on a 6-month period of time a transitioning, what I call warfighter, to assist with your company, sponsored by the DoD, and also contracting officers in different lines of business, and we win contracts. So to directly answer your question, we have 5 large contracts with the government right now. We work with the National Science Foundation for Space Tech, specifically space domain awareness. We're getting into a phase 2. We're partnered with a federally funded research and development center. We have a large multiple award construction contract that was leveraged after Hurricane Michael decimated Tyndall Air Force Base to build the base of the future. How do we build purpose-built structures? We also have a GSA emerging tech contract that has a ceiling value of $50 billion over 10 years. And then finally, we have what we call a systems engineering contract for testing and training for the test centers throughout the nation. And on those contract vehicles, task orders are awarded, Rogue partners with the right technology, and we execute contracts.
Thank you, Chris. And this, obviously, each of these gentlemen have a different perspective from their experience, which is wonderful for my next question. So let's think about the Defense Department in terms of a marketplace, or national security as a marketplace. What do you see as not only current but future needs, and what comments might you have for some of our audience here, whether it's a startup, an existing company, academia, investment community, et cetera? Where do they have a potential opportunity to play a role? And I'll just throw it up, and whoever wants to start.
I would say first to academia, finance, and small business, or we say non-traditional defense contractors. Obviously, as Lisa mentioned, the market basket is tremendous. So for us, it's about trying to attract true best-in-class performers into the defense industrial base, right? How do you attract many non-traditional performers who otherwise were unaware of or not interested in doing work with the department, and how do you get them interested and on contract to begin performing and solving some of our nation's most prickly problems? So again, it's events like this where you got to meet the performers where they are, and then in parallel with that it is simplified acquisition, right? And again, to dramatically oversimplify that to companies interested in doing work with the department, trying to make it as commercial-esque as possible, so that you may work on, whether it's direct with DIU or through one of the consortium managers on another transaction authority, but to you it's a 12-page commercial agreement, and there's another contractual and fiscal fiduciary upstream from you that's managing that relationship with the department, and you can do what you do best, which is whatever your unique and compelling capability is. So I think from the department's perspective, that's certainly it, Lisa.
All right. Thanks. Here's Ryan.
One thing as an investor, maybe the other fellow investors will hopefully sympathize with me in this, is that I feel like a lesson I have to relearn, at least on some reoccurring basis, is that certainly in venture or early stage investing in general, it's very much a patterns-based or pattern recognition-based business or a trends-based business. And I think when we think about defense tech, it's always kind of helpful to think maybe where we're at in the movie. Certainly when I came out of grad school, it was early aughts, and most of what was happening at that time was you had, Mike mentioned, well, defense industry is looking for non-traditionals. Back then, the industry was trying to scale up in response to global war on terror, and prior to that, it had been highly consolidated, right? Without kind of going in too far into a history lesson. And so fast forward to today, we're now in this stage where a lot of great mechanisms have been put in place over the last few years to try to expand that industrial base again. And so from an opportunities perspective, anytime there's kind of friction or uncertainty, there's a lot of different vectors to potentially enter into. And I think one of the areas DIU has done a really good job at is articulating essentially each different problem set and completely disaggregating it across, again, software is something about stacks, but whether you're in hardware or software, where you could plug in as a different feature or supplier, historically that was really hard to do. And you almost had to raise your own tremendous amount of capital just to triage even the market, little less build the product, deliver it, sell it, and have any sort of customer success. And so I think one of the core areas that we do when we talk with emerging companies or those that are even thinking about it is just helping them work backwards from some highlighted programs. The company may never ever service that customer, may never even talk to them, but it serves as, if nothing else, a good stalking horse to figure out where are they trying to work, because I've certainly been more the problem than the solution at times, where I'll think, I have a cool solution, I've developed something, I will find a human being that will want this. And you're like, did I actually solve anything or not? And so I think just to summarize, I think one of the areas that's been really good is, I forget the name, the last org that did it, but they sent out, DoD listed, their 14 critical areas. It's a good thought exercise, right? When someone says like AI, so this area I'm a little more comfortable in, or advanced analytics, decomposing, right? Are you on the infra stack? All right, are you on some sort of applications layer? Okay, here are the customers that work in that. Here are their problem sets. And it at least helps structure kind of where in the movie, where in the industry that potential company could fit. And then you can kind of start working with your own customer surveys and outreach.
So let me ask you a little bit of a follow-on with that, Ryan, with what you said. Sometimes you do get excited about what you have to offer, and they may not know it yet, right? So it's a little bit of art and science, not just matching what's specifically mapped out on an RFP or something, but you also want to introduce new thinking and new technology. So you have to balance that art and science.
100%, right? And I certainly don't have the decoder ring. I've seen other people that do have it, where there comes a point where you have to force your idea through. And it was one of the first transactions I ever worked on. The name of the company was Mapbox, and they did essentially easy map visualizations. So like if you ever use like DoorDash or anything, like that's all running a Slippy map web map format. That's all Mapbox. And at the time, the U.S. government didn't have any requirement for that. They're like, we use this sort of GIS front end. It doesn't need to be dynamic. No one ever cares about that. We only have N number of people that even use a mobile. Why would we even think about this format? And that was one of those lightning in a bottle moments where there were a lot of smart people that were involved, some great early government adopters at one of the intelligence agencies. That was an example of forcing that requirement through some emerging early stage contracts that ended up building the requirement that the government said we can't live without. I mean, I'm sure you've lived this on both sides of the fence, but there is that friction where I remember being told these are good guys. He sounds bad in the story, but he was like, "Can you read the requirements I need, or do I need to spell it for you?" And I said, "You may need to spell it for me because I'm coming up with some errors." Anyways, you're spot on.
Chris, what do you think?
No, I agree too. I know we're getting short on time, but I always say lightning in a bottle in a closet in the basement is no good for the DoD, and it's really to leverage off of that too is you have to engage. We're really, really open right now. We're really receptive, but Mike probably has a white paper every 2 days come out and say, open my aperture as a government. We can't get out there. We can't provide the exhaustive audit. Respond to market research. Respond to white papers. Push your solution. And that engagement, and then take the feedback. It's always good within these OTAs is they'll give you a stoplight feedback and say green, yellow, or red, which basically states green, definitely submit based on this white paper. We're really, really interested. Or yellow, they'll give you some feedback. We like what you're doing here, just to be broad, but can you tweak it this way? Flexibility, right? Be flexible with your solution. And then red a lot of times is we have zero interest. Don't give up in that either, because the government as a whole, not just the DoD, is a large ecosystem. And there may be some other agencies or departments that may be interested in what you're doing. And then finally, I think we've changed, and I really like this as well. It started really with SOF and SOCOM and Det 1, where we really started the works, as I call them, AFWorks and SOFWorks and SpaceWorks, where it was called fly to buy in the Air Force. Give me something, let me break it, let me ruggedize it, let me fix it, let me tailor it, but just give me it. And there was no more research, development, technology, evaluation, these long-term contracts for what I call the pseudo-government, and they're great, but the bigs and the primes, and that's also doing work with the government too, because as you alluded to, you need CPARs, which are past performance. You need subcontracts. You need the proper cost accounting system as well. It would be great if you had a facility clearance. So even though you may not get your first opportunity with the DoD, there's a robust network of internal research and development dollars available by major prime contractors. Geographically, think of where you are. We mentioned Crane. You can go to the Naval Surface Warfare Center. You can get a list of the majority of their prime contract holders, and you can contact that company individually. And there is a mandate for them to work with small business. Whether you're woman-owned, minority-owned, service-disabled veteran-owned, up to 32% of the budget gives you what I say an accelerated path to graduate through a program to do business with the government. So that engagement, that flexibility, and then proven adaptable systems allow the government to test and train on that. That's how you'll attract investment. That's how DIU will say, you've already de-risked this. This has been a massive risk reduction effort, right? I'm on a small STTR, leverage that STTR, which is a small business innovative research project. Partner with Purdue. Co-locate with Purdue, co-locate with Indiana, reach out to Launch Fishers, reach out to Elevate Ventures, and really engage, because we're so receptive right now because of our near-peer competitors in the world today to reach out to small business, and we need to broaden that industrial base.
Chris, I know you live in Florida, but with those kind of plugs for Indiana organizations, we're making you an honorary Hoosier, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask this question in two questions wrapped in. You can answer one or both. I'll leave it up to you. How have you been helped, your organization been helped by state and local governments? And since we are sitting in the heartland, what advantages do you see in establishing a Midwest Technology Center versus, say, Silicon Valley?
Well, I'll grab that one first. So certainly the Indiana delegation has been tremendous supporters and engaged with the department and the entire ecosystem in support of NSWC Crane and the Indiana National Guard. If you've been following Chips and Science, Senator Todd Young co-sponsored the bill, $50 billion plus. The first $2.2 billion of that through Microelectronics Commons is already starting to flow. So lots of opportunities. So, but part of that also for the crowd is be engaged with your legislators so they know what the ground truth is, right, and how they can actually engage and support. And then, more broadly, in engaging with the department or DIU. Similarly, you want to be that conduit between the ground truth and state and local, and ensuring that they're messaging and connecting inside the different department and programs kind of as well, right? So press from both sides.
And what I would add to that, in that certainly a majority of our portfolio, when they're building out into growth stage, it's not a requirement certainly, but one of the things that we've found extremely helpful time and time again is wherever those companies are located to work right with either the state-backed venture entity or growth accelerator. Sometimes they're kind of merged into one, sometimes they're disaggregated. But to Mike's to both points, right? There's not only capital but access to other potential design partnerships, which I've yet to meet an early or mid-stage hard tech or deep tech company that doesn't want some sort of design partnership or support. And then with a lot of these other accelerators, I primarily look in the software sector, but again, I've yet to meet a software company that, if they're in the analytics category, that isn't looking for compute services, compute credit, or other ways to augment or defray their capex as they're experimenting with their product. And time again, pouring out through our portfolio, state-based accelerators or funds are a major mechanism to help those companies get to market faster.
Great. Chris?
I agree 100%, and give another plug to Indiana. The first company I started after Lockheed Martin, we founded our company in the Northeast Indiana Innovation Center. And because of that, we were able to leverage what I call a massive manufacturing base here that was developed with the auto industry. And when I look at the Midwest in general, you have the National Center for Manufacturing Sciences, and allow the government to pull you into that. We talk about clusters, but for me, you have health tech, biotech, and you have manufacturing. A lot of the same products that these mom and pop manufacturing shops produce here in Indiana for Indy racing are the precision products we need as a government as well. So we worked with graphene and we worked with beryllium, and believe it or not, in Brazil, Indiana today, I have manufacturing machines that are the only machines in the continental United States that can produce heater flange assemblies for the Tomahawk cruise missile system. We were buying them from Kongsberg in Norway because we didn't do that exhaustive audit. So you won't find that out unless you partner in your geography with your state. And your state, a lot of times, I would say, has skeleton keys. For GuardianSat, we took advantage of the Tampa Bay Wave Accelerator. We were part of the University of South Florida's Institute of Applied Engineering. We're part of the Florida High Tech Corridor. We also did the Tampa Bay Wave. So if you're in a startup, do an accelerator. For folks here like Ryan, walk through that 3-month program. Even as a GovTech, I guess, experienced professional, I recently enrolled in 3 accelerators almost at the same time. And it was great for me to look at it from a lens of, what does private equity look at? What does venture capital look at? What does DIU look at from a maturity perspective as well? All of these programs, literally, if you just search on your computer, are probably within 150 miles of you, and just choose one. Do it right, network, connect, and then leverage all the resources. For me at GuardianSat, the majority of our subject matter experts come from USF. Our PhDs come from USF. They've launched 3 satellites at USF. You'd be surprised what we've done in Indiana as far as manufacturing and biotech as well, and health tech. Is the state is integral, and then ultimately, once you get to that point, because of your networking, appropriations are huge if you want to grow to get to a mid-size or a large company as well. And so make certain you leverage that relationship with your congressmen, with your senators, and let them know you are creating jobs in your locality, and they will listen.
Excellent. And in our final minute, we'll do rapid fire. And Chris, we'll start with you because I think you already may have answered it. What advice do you have? Give them one piece of advice. What would you give?
My advice would be part of an incubator or accelerator on defense tech in your local community, and I think that will accelerate your process and your pathway into the government.
Mike?
I would say, first of all, it's happening all around you. I mean, literally tonight, my team and I are hosting the program, Rapid Defense Experimentation Reserves. We have 80 performers who are coming. They're going to meet gov, military, and demoing for awards these last 10 days and through this week. And Congressman Banks is hosting the Northeast Defense Innovation Summit September 4th up in Fort Wayne. So it's happening all around you. So the soundbite is get engaged, team, and find institutional finance, if you can, who's interested to help you scale and understand you as a performer.
Excellent. Brian?
Mine would be an amendment or addition to Mike's, is that whatever you can do to break away from inertia, whether that is, there are all sorts of accelerators, even in the Hacking for Defense model that goes through the Institute and University, where you only just do like a 4-week idea course. That may not result in a company, but it forces you to go out, to talk to people, to start figuring out what you even like or what you don't even want to do, or what you don't, right? That's really important too. So anything where you can start, that process goes a long way.
Thank you. Well, you can probably agree with me that this was an exceptional panel because they didn't talk about things up here. They were practical, gave you tactical information. I hope you found it worthwhile. It was wonderful having you today, and thank you for attending.